In one corner, we have Link, the hero who has saved the world of Hyrule countless times and defeated many evil foes, big and small, throughout the ages. And in the other, we have the Fierce Deity, an evil mask with a mysterious past filled with dark magic that was given to Link by Majora's Mask. Both of them are incredibly powerful, but if the two of them were to end up in a fight, then who would win? Well, today we will look at their powers and abilities, strength, speed, and stamina, and last but not least, their strategy to see who would win this battle. So, let's begin. Since the beginning of time, Link, the chosen hero, has been saving the world from Ganondorf and other foes that threaten the innocent. Throughout the years, he has obtained many different items as well as abilities to overcome any challenge, especially when fighting evil beings. For this battle, he will be able to use almost everything. For example, he has the Triforce Piece of Courage, all the classic items, and the trusty Sheikah Slate as well as Zonai Arm. The only things he won't be able to use are the Transformation Masks, Zonai Devices, and Magic Armor, mostly because these are either too overpowered or completely change the whole battle. We want Link to fight the Fierce Deity after all, not a Goron, Robot, Deku, or Zora. But aside from those, he will be able to use all his other tricks because this will give him the best chance of winning. And I think he will need it when fighting a god like the Fierce Deity, because as we all know, he is quite powerful, being able to destroy the evil Majora's Mask with ease. But in the end, we know nothing about him really, only that he is very strong and has many dark powers. Because when Link is in the ferocious Fierce Deity form, he gains significantly greater strength and range in his attacks, as well as certain new abilities, reaching a godlike level. Now his arsenal is a bit limited compared to Link, only being able to use his mighty Helix Sword. And another thing he has going for himself is his great armor set and size, which could give him an edge. But let's start with the first round, powers and abilities. First, let's look at Link, because man oh man, he has a lot of options when it comes to taking on enemies. When it comes to his classic weapons, he has plenty of options, from close quarters weapons like his Master Sword and Big Goron Sword, to insane ranged weapons like a bow, and even a huge ball and chain that he could throw at the Fierce Deity. In many ways, he is spoiled for choice, and so he would probably cycle through a lot of these weapons to see if any of them would be particularly effective against this evil god. And then, aside from these more conventional items, he also has other powers he could use like the Sheikah Slate or Zonai Hand. Overall, I wouldn't label these as weapons, but they could still be useful when taking on the Fierce Deity. For example, in a fight, you could use Ascend to get to a vantage point, and from there you could bombard your foe with arrows. And options like these will certainly help him in a battle, just like we have seen throughout all the Zelda games. However, he isn't the only one who has a couple of tricks up his sleeve, because while the Fierce Deity's arsenal is limited, the stuff that he has is incredibly useful. His massive Helix Blade gives him amazing range, and his height also helps with this. Meanwhile, he can shoot sword beams very fast, much faster than Link ever could. And if he's able to hit anyone with his sword, he deals an insane amount of damage due to the sword beam as well as the actual blade hitting someone. When this happens, he deals 4 times as much damage as the Master Sword would. Meanwhile, his armor is much harder to bypass than Link's, which probably lowers the damage he takes. So clearly, both of them have some strong powers and abilities that could be used to turn the tide of battle. But when it comes to this category, which one has an advantage over the other? Well, in my opinion, this one was pretty difficult to answer, because while Link has a lot more options than the Fierce Deity, many of them aren't that great, to be honest. Sure, the idea of using the ball and chain from Twilight Princess sounds like a great idea, but you gotta keep in mind that this weapon is incredibly slow, and so the Fierce Deity could easily dodge this attack. And even something like the normal boomerang would be pretty ineffective because it probably doesn't hit hard enough. I mean, we are fighting a god wearing plate armor after all. So this is a bit of a problem. Link has a load of options, but many of them won't be that effective. Well, that's what I would expect at least. Meanwhile, the Fierce Deity only has 2 options really. Normal sword attacks and his sword beams. But both of them are are incredibly strong as well as effective. So who has an edge over the other in this scenario? Well, I would say Link, because while a lot of his tools and tricks aren't necessarily great, some would still be perfect for dealing with the Fierce Deity. Like the bow and its elemental arrows, the strength that Link receives from the Triforce Piece of Courage, and even the defensive options he has like the Hylian Shield. All of this would help him immensely. So I would say that Link wins this round. On to the next one. Strength, speed, and stamina. As we have seen throughout the Zelda games, Link is pretty strong. He can block strikes that would crush any normal person, and has lifted rocks 100 times his size, which is pretty impressive. However, this isn't all. He's also incredibly fast, both when it comes to reaction time and movement speed. In Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, he can deflect some crazy attacks, and when using Flurry Rush, he has superhuman speed. Even in older titles, he could be super fast when having an item like the Pegasus Boots equipped. To be honest, the only thing he lacks is stamina. Sure, he can do some crazy stuff in short bursts when he focuses, but as soon as he tries to sprint for 500 meters, he is completely exhausted. It's a bit strange, but it's clear that Link has focused a lot on fast twitch muscles, allowing for short and powerful movements. But his slow twitch muscle fibers are very underdeveloped, so as soon as he has to run a marathon, he will struggle. So his short bursts of energy are legendary and superhuman, but his overall stamina isn't really impressive, which is certainly a weak point. And it isn't his only one, because while Link is impressive, he is only so impressive because of the items he has obtained throughout his adventures. Without them, he would be screwed. So if the Fierce Deity would be able to break them, then Link would be in for trouble. But since that doesn't really happen in any of the games aside from weapons, we will ignore this. But still, I think that these magical items won't match the power of a god. But what about the Fierce Deity? Well, from everything we have seen, we know that he is very strong, probably on a similar level as Link, but he might be even stronger. Especially in some spin-off titles like Hyrule Warriors, he's capable of impressive stuff, cutting the moon created by Majora in half. Although I am taking those with a grain of salt, because technically they aren't canon. Still, I think his strength is the most impressive thing about him. Just look at those muscles! Now, when it comes to reaction time, speed, and stamina, he's also in a pretty good spot. But he can't do something like a Flurry Rush. So in some ways, Link is better. However, you gotta keep in mind he's much taller than the average Hylian, including Link, being around 8 foot tall, which is 243 centimeters. And he's also some sort of god. So his physical capabilities are certainly superhuman. For example, in the game, he can run as fast as normal Link wearing the bunny hood, is even quicker when going backwards, and can jump incredibly long distances. So while he can't pull off some of Link's craziest moves, he can probably keep up with him. Meanwhile, Link will struggle with all the sword beams coming at him. Sure, he can dodge some with abilities like Flurry Rush, but the Fierce Deity will just keep sending loads of them at an insane pace. And when fighting, the Fierce Deity will overall be faster than Link, especially in the long run, because the Fierce Deity doesn't suffer from stamina issues. So when it comes to this category, who comes out on top? Well, I would say the Fierce Deity, due to his god status and above average size. But that doesn't mean that Link can't be challenging to deal with at times. But still, being a god has its perks compared to being a chosen mortal that heavily relies on magical items to keep up. Now for our last point, strategy. When it comes to this, we know that Link has many options due to all the different items and abilities that he has obtained throughout the games. But when fighting a godly being like the Fierce Deity, what would Link actually do in order to win this fight? Well, when you keep Link's options and the Fierce Deity's weaknesses in mind, I think he has two potential strategies that he could try. First, try to take him down from a distance by firing all kinds of arrows at him and throwing stuff like boomerangs. This way, he could stay out of range of the Fierce Deity's melee attacks that do an insane amount of damage. Now, I bet that some options, like the normal boomerang, won't be that effective. However, almost every type of arrow, special boomerangs like the Gale Boomerang, and stuff like bombs, will most likely hurt this deity. Especially elemental arrows like the Light Arrow, which do extra damage to dark beings, and the Ancient Arrow, which is incredibly powerful overall. But could this work? Well, I think it could, but there's one issue. The Fierce Deity also has a powerful ranged attack that he can basically spam. We can already see this in Majora's Mask when fighting bosses. He can fire huge sword beams very fast and also accurately, so Link will have to deal with these, and I don't think he could win that fight. His bow and other ranged weapons are just too slow, and so he will get hit. Sure, he could for example throw the Gale Boomerang to stun the Fierce Deity, and then he could shoot arrows at him. But it could also be that the extremely fast and agile Fierce Deity will dodge these attacks and use that as an opportunity to bombard Link with sword beams. And due to that, I would say that this strategy won't end well. So what else could Link try? Well, I think another option he has is getting up close, which has a couple of advantages. He doesn't have to think about the sword beams as much, and he could parry as well as dodge the Fierce Deity's attacks. If he does this, he could enter Flurry Rush, allowing him to get a load of free hits in on the Fierce Deity, if he is faster than him at least. Because we've also seen other powerful beings like Ganondorf use the Flurry Rush against Link, so this could be very effective, but it depends on whether the Fierce Deity could counter this. If not, then I think this would be Link's best option. But of course, this approach also has one big downside. It is high risk, high reward. Like I mentioned before, the Fierce Deity's melee attacks deal an insane amount of damage. So if Link is hit, then he will lose a lot of health. But how many hits could he handle? Well, after doing some research in Breath of the Wild, because that game has a lot of weapon damage data, I found out that one direct hit from the Fierce Deity, maybe two, is enough to kill Link. And of course, both the Fierce Deity and Link aren't allowed to use fairies or other healing items. So yeah, sure, he can go for close quarters, allowing him to use powerful abilities like the Flurry Rush. But if he messes up, then the Fierce Deity could instantly kill him. Clearly, Link is in a difficult position because the two options he has aren't great. But we also need to think about the strategy of the Fierce Deity. What would he do in this fight? Well, I think that his best option by far is keeping distance, dodging any attacks from Link, and constantly throw sword beams at him. This would be super effective, especially because the Fierce Deity is so fast, making this kiting technique a good choice. And it would also make it very hard for Link to get up close, so he can do stuff like parry attacks and dodge them to activate Flurry Rush. As long as there's enough distance, Link will have trouble, so this one tactic would also effectively ruin one of Link's options. But who would win this? Well, this is a very difficult question to answer, but I would say that in a one-on-one battle to the death between the Fierce Deity and Link, that the Fierce Deity would win. Now, one big reason why I would side with him winning is that the Fierce Deity's damage and speed give him a massive advantage over Link. Don't get me wrong, the Hylian hero has a lot of options, and while not all of them are great, some of them are very promising. Meanwhile, the Fierce Deity is incredibly powerful, and basically all of its attacks are very effective, but he can only do two things: fire sword beams, or strike Link down directly with his sword, but that's it. However, I think that this would be enough to win. During the battle, Link will probably start looking for an effective strategy for dealing with the Fierce Deity, using all the items and powers at his disposal. For example, in order to get close, he could charge at him using the Pegasus boots, or he bomb jumps using his shield, which would certainly surprise the Fierce Deity. And these are just two options out of the more than dozen options that Link has. However, this experimenting could easily go wrong, and if that happens, the Fierce Deity will be able to get some hits in. And like I said before, this would be the end for Link. Alright, just imagine. Link charges him using the Pegasus boots. Now this could be a great way to get close to him, but if the Fierce Deity dodges this attack and bombards him with sword beams, then Link is done. So I would say that Link could win, but he would have to find an effective approach right away, because failed attempts are costly. Meanwhile, the Fierce Deity, due to his god status and better armor, can take more hits than Link. Also because Link's damage is nowhere near as high as the Fierce Deity's. This could give him time to work around any effective strategy that Link comes up with. So, because of reasons like these, I think that in most instances, the Fierce Deity would win this fight. But let me know in the comments down below what you think, and leave any suggestions down there as well. Aside from that, don't forget, be sure to leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss any future videos.